Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, so today we're diving into this completely mind-bending historical paradox. We're looking back at the Second World War, and we're going to ask a question that pretty much upends how we usually think about battlefield technology. Why did the most terrifying infantry weapon of the entire conflict suddenly become a literal death sentence for the very men firing it? It's this incredible story of how a seemingly unstoppable weapon wasn't neutralized by better technology, but by a relentless interlocking system. Picture this. It's July 11th, 1944. We're in a dense Norman hedgerow. You've got a German gunner lying completely concealed behind a deadly MG42 machine gun, and he's looking out at a column of American infantrymen completely exposed in a pasture just 400 yards away. I mean, it is a perfect, uninterrupted field of fire. His weapon is loaded, the assistant gunner is ready to go, the Americans haven't even seen him. And yet, he and his commander choose absolute, unmoving silence. They didn't move. They barely breathed. They literally just watched the Americans walk right on by. So, why? Section 1, a clash of doctrines, the rifle versus the machine gun. So, to understand why that veteran gunner didn't even touch the trigger, you really have to understand the beast he was manning. 20. That is the exact number of rounds the MG42 spit out every single second. The German army practically built their entire defensive playbook around protecting and feeding this one gun. American soldiers actually called it Hitler's Buzzsaw because, well, it didn't even sound like individual gunshots. It fired so unbelievably fast, it sounded like a tearing bedsheet. I mean, entire platoons literally froze in place the first time they heard it. And here's where you really see the stark contrast in doctrine. On the German side, the squad was basically a spine built just to support that one weapon. The riflemen carried slow, bolt-action Kar 98s, and their main job was simply to feed the machine gun and keep it safe. But the Americans, they equipped every single man in a 12-man squad with a self-loading M1 Garand. This was a semi-automatic rifle that could fire 8 aimed rounds almost instantly. The Americans built their squad around the individual riflemen, and that fundamental difference completely set the stage for everything that followed. Moving on to Section 2, the 3-minute death sentence. Building the chain of firepower. Now, that semi-automatic advantage we just talked about, it kicked off a genuinely terrifying timeline for the defenders. The second a German MG42 opened up, it wasn't met with fear or hesitation anymore. It was met with an overwhelming, perfectly synchronized wall of return fire. Just look at the sequence. Within 4 seconds, 12 American M1 Garands fired directly at the muzzle flash, completely suppressing the gunner so he physically cannot lift his head. At 15 seconds, local 60mm mortar shells start raining down on his position. And then the absolute clincher, within 3 minutes, an American forward observer calls down an entire artillery battalion directly onto that muzzle flash. 18. That is how many high-explosive guns could just rain down on a single position in under 3 minutes. Unlike other armies where requesting artillery meant sending a message up this incredibly slow chain of command that could easily take 20 minutes or more, the American forward observer was right there in the mud with the infantry. A single lieutenant holding a radio could coordinate 18 high-explosive guns in a matter of seconds. They essentially turned that initial German muzzle flash into a homing beacon for total destruction. Firing the MG42 was no longer a tactical advantage. You were basically ringing the dinner bell for American artillery. All right, Section 3, breaking the bocage. The environment strikes back. But you know, war is never static, right? The environment always gets a vote. And in the dense, overgrown hedgerows of Normandy, an area known as the bocage, this insanely lethal 3-minute system hit a literal wall of earth and tangled brush. We're talking earthen walls up to 4 feet thick. They just absorbed bullets like sponges and completely hid the muzzle flashes of those MG42s. The American forward observers couldn't even see past the very next field. This terrain gave German commanders this renewed, arrogant confidence. As one German company commander put it, the guns could not see what they were shooting at. So for a brief moment, their machine guns were invincible once again. Well, enter an absolutely brilliant piece of battlefield ingenuity, the Rhino tank. Curtis Cullen, this 29-year-old cavalry sergeant from New Jersey, looked at the heavy steel anti-tank obstacles the Germans had planted all over the Normandy beaches, and he had a light bulb moment. He took those steel prongs and welded them right to the front of a Sherman tank. Talk about irony, right? Using the Germans' own defenses against them. This innovation allowed 33 tons of steel to just burst straight through the earth embankments with its main gun perfectly level. It instantly stripped away the MG42's hiding spots, drawing their fire and allowing the American infantry to sweep right in. Which brings us to Section 4, an army that learns the invisible weapon. Now, the Rhino tank was amazing, for sure, but it was really just the physical key that unlocked something much, much bigger, a kind of invisible weapon. The real secret was this interconnected, rapidly evolving system of shared tactical knowledge. Check out this 5-day cycle. An American unit out in the field would invent a brand new hedgerow tactic, maybe combining a Rhino tank with a very specific flanking maneuver and mortar smoke. A lieutenant would write up a report that exact same night, and within 5 days, that tactic was printed on a mimeographed bulletin and shoved into the hands of every single platoon leader across the entire First Army. 5 days, from a field invention to army-wide adoption. And this right here perfectly illustrates why the Germans fundamentally lost their edge. You see, while their individual non-commissioned officers were absolutely brilliant tacticians, they were trapped in this super rigid top-down hierarchy. That, plus their shattered communication lines, meant tactical lessons stayed completely local. A really clever trick learned by a German squad leader in one town simply never reached the next town over. Meanwhile, the American army was rapid, lateral, and highly communicative. They harvested innovation from every single engagement and distributed it way faster than the defenders could ever adapt. The Americans were fighting and learning as a single massive organism.
And that leads us to Section 5, the verdict at Mortain, the system perfected.
So this entire relentless escalation really hits its climax in August 1944 at Mortain. You've got 700 surrounded Americans on Hill 317, and they are facing a massive, multi-division German counteroffensive ordered by Hitler himself. German armor and infantry are absolutely everywhere. But rather than panicking, these surrounded Americans used those forward observers, who had working radios, to command an unbelievable 225 artillery guns from miles away. Every single time a German machine gun dared to reveal its position, those forward observers just dropped a devastating curtain of high-explosive steel right on top of it. It was precision destruction on a truly terrifying scale.
Okay, let's look at this final stack to see the whole machine humming together. Layer 1, 12 semi-automatic M1 Garands suppress the target instantly. Layer 2, 60mm mortars target the muzzle flash. Layer 3, immediate battalion artillery, called in by a forward observer. Layer 4, Rhino tanks breaking open the protective terrain. And Layer 5, a rapid lessons learned system that adapts army-wide tactics in a matter of days. This interlocking system made surviving behind an MG42 mathematically impossible.
Which totally solves our opening mystery, right? That abandoned, fully loaded machine gun sitting in the Norman hedgerow back in July. It wasn't a failure of German training, and it wasn't a lack of bravery. It was a chillingly logical realization. That veteran German crew understood that against this relentless, layered American system, pulling the trigger was simply a death sentence. The weapon itself hadn't changed one bit, but the system operating against it had rendered it completely suicidal to use. So as we reflect on how this layered, rapid learning system absolutely dismantled the deadliest infantry weapon of its era, it kind of forces us to look at our own world. The Americans didn't just rely on a single silver bullet. They built a dynamic machine of compounding solutions. It really leaves us with this huge question. What interlocking systems are we failing to build to solve our own impossible challenges today? What massive problems are we trying to fix with just a single tool, when what we actually need is to be building a 5-layer machine? Definitely something to think about. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.